finest embracing stories of NBA history.
On December 27, 1991, the worst shooting performance in NBA history took place, and you'll never guess what allegedly caused it. The player's name is Tim Hardaway, and no, I'm not talking about this one. I'm talking about this one, the senior. Now don't get it twisted, Hardaway was the real deal. He's an NBA Hall of Famer. He was so ahead of his time with his insane handle and his crossover dribbles, and he could score from just about anywhere on the court. But on one random night in 1991, he seemingly forgot all of those skills, as it probably looked as if the Monstars had stolen his talent. Now to be clear, there's absolutely no footage that I can find of this game online, and I can promise you that there's no one happier about that fact than Tim Hardaway himself. Now this was a road game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and according to Tim, the locker room for the away team was such a bright yellow color that it was incredibly disorienting. He asked the ball boy why the locker room was such a yellow color, and he told Tim that it was to calm and relax the opposing team to throw them off of their game. Well, he thought it was ridiculous in the moment, but it sure sounds like it did the trick in hindsight, as Hardaway went on to have the worst shooting night of his career. On the evening, he shot the ball a total of 17 times, and he missed a total of 17 times. To this day, this is the most shots in a single game of NBA history without a single make. Now what's incredible is that his Warriors somehow still won the game in overtime, with a final score of 106 to 102, as Hardaway got an A+ on the group assignment. To his credit, he bounced back in a major way, because in their very next game against the Los Angeles Lakers, he came out aggressive and determined to redeem himself, as he dropped 30 points on 13 of 21 shooting. Now that's nice and all, but it won't erase the 0 of 17 from the record book, and nearly 35 years later, he's still waiting for someone to replace it. You hear old heads talk about it all the time, how nobody plays defense anymore in the modern NBA, and how teams don't work as hard on that end of the court as much as they used to. Well, I can promise you one thing. When they're talking about great defensive teams from past eras, they're definitely not talking about the 1990 to 1991 Denver Nuggets. This team was utter garbage on defense. They weren't just bad, and they were not just record-breaking bad, but their defensive effort was so epically awful that I honestly think you'll have a hard time believing it when I explain the details.
Boy, was that bad defense. Woo! Fumigate the joint.
But first, let's get some context about who this team was and where they came from. The Denver Nuggets of the 1980s were famous for several reasons, like their blistering pace of play, their incredibly potent offense, and their annually atrocious defense. This team was the very definition of the best defense being double the offense. During this era, it was a very regular outcome for the Nuggets to finish with the best offense in the entire league, while also having the league's worst defense. Despite their incredibly lopsided play style, the team was actually pretty competitive, with an all-time great scoring forward in Alex English and a consistent triple-double threat at point guard in Lafayette Lever, more commonly known as Fat Lever. Leading up to the 1990 to 1991 season, the Nuggets had made it to the NBA playoffs 9 straight years, making it as far as the Western Conference Finals in 1985, where they had been eliminated by the Showtime Lakers. So again, although their defense was bad year in and year out, they were still often a very competitive and respectable squad. With that being said, things were dramatically changing at the start of the 1990 to 1991 season. First off, their 2 cornerstone players over the last decade were now departing from the team in the twilight of their careers, as Alex English left in free agency and Fat Lever was traded to the Dallas Mavericks. Along with that, the organization was also in a transition period with their leadership, as they brought in a brand new head coach by the name of Paul Westhead, and they hired a new general manager in Bernie Bickerstaff. The only noteworthy players remaining on the roster were a collection of bucket getters, who were notorious for excelling only offensively. Guys like Michael Adams, Orlando Woolridge, and Walter Davis. Literally, the only defensive bright spot that team had on their roster was a 35-year-old T.R. Dunn, who had made 3 all-defense teams throughout his career and was usually the guy assigned to guard the elite perimeter scorers, like Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler. The problem is that Dunn got injured and decided to call it a career after playing only 17 games in the regular season. Now, the stars had perfectly aligned, and there was nothing interfering Denver from having one of the worst defensive seasons in NBA history. Nobody had high expectations for this group, and even with their new leadership, the culture of laziness and apathetic defensive effort was still firmly intact. Everyone thought this would be an ugly year, but no one could have foreseen or imagined just how disgustingly ugly it would actually get. They opened up their regular season against the Golden State Warriors, who were led by the legendary head coach Don Nelson and a trio of star players in Mitch Richmond, Chris Mullin, and Tim Hardaway. These Run TMC Warriors were also well known for their potent offense and their lackluster defense, so what ensued was a comically high-scoring game. Just look at the amazing defense on display from the Denver Nuggets. Look at the rim protection. Look at the commitment to the perimeter shooters. The result was the highest scoring regulation game in NBA history, as the Warriors defeated the Nuggets with a final score of 162 to 158. Now that's bad enough as is, but I was actually watching footage of this game, and listen to what the commentator says shortly after tip-off.
The Denver Nuggets gave up close to 164 points a game in the preseason.
Close to 164 points a game in the preseason.
I know it's only the preseason, but they were giving up 164 points per game. That's almost enough to compete with modern All-Star games. I know it sounds crazy to even fathom, but somehow it only got worse from here. The Nuggets would start their season with a 1-11 record, and over that stretch, they were allowing a jaw-dropping 144.6 points per game. No night was worse than November 10th, 1990, when they were playing against the playoff-bound Phoenix Suns. This wasn't just a massacre, but it was one of the most embarrassing team performances in the history of sports. The Nuggets were trailing the Phoenix Suns 107 to 67 at halftime. To this very day, 107 points in a single half is the most in NBA history. And frankly, second place isn't even close. Imagine your team scores 67 points by the end of the first half, and you're still losing by 40. The final score ended up being 173 to 143. And here's another crazy fact. On the night, the Phoenix Suns were 0 of 2 from three-point range. That's right, the Denver Nuggets defense gave up 173 points to a team in regulation time only without them making a single three-point shot. If that doesn't emphasize just how bad this defense was, then pretty much nothing will. Now, I'm sure the Nuggets wish that their season had ended right there on the spot, but unfortunately, it continued. Remember how Scott Skiles of the Orlando Magic set the NBA record for the most assists in a single game with 30? Well, that game actually happened against these Nuggets, where the Orlando Magic put up 155 points in a complete blowout. Skiles, a career 11 points per game scorer, also had 22 points to go along with his 30 assists. Eventually, the 1991 Nuggets were put out of their misery, as they finished the regular season with a 20-62 record, which was the worst in the league that season. Somehow, someway, they were ranked number 1 in the entire league that year in scoring, putting up 119.9 points per game. Those 120 points on a nightly basis translated to just 20 wins. And that's because, on the year, they allowed 130.8 points per game, which is easily the most points allowed in NBA history. For the most part, this historically disastrous squad has been widely forgotten, and that's partially due to the fact that they didn't stay that way very long. Because in the following NBA draft, they took Dikembe Mutombo with their first pick, who was simply one of the greatest defensive players in the history of the league, and he basically changed the culture of that squad overnight. With that being said, if we're looking at one individual season in a bottle, then there's little doubt in my mind that the 1990 to 1991 Denver Nuggets are the worst defensive team that the NBA has ever seen. So now it's your turn. If there is one great offensive team that you could put up against these 1991 Denver Nuggets, which team would you choose? And how many points do you think they'd score? I look forward to hearing your hilarious suggestions in the comment section below.
The Boston Celtics are the NBA World Champions.
I pride myself in being the guy who's going.
Earvin Magic Johnson is seen by many, maybe even most, as the greatest point guard in NBA history. This incredibly flashy superstar made it all the way to the NBA Finals 9 times in his career, and in almost every instance, he excelled on the court when it mattered the most. Most basketball historians would consider Magic as one of the most clutch players of all time. But unfortunately, in one specific final series, he was anything but clutch, and the outcome was so devastating to him emotionally and psychologically that people at the time questioned whether or not he would be able to recover and redeem his reputation. To understand the context and the magnitude of the moment, we have to briefly recap the beginning of Magic's career. The 1979 NCAA championship game was basically the beginning of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson's rivalry, as it was not only a massive contest for the two stars involved, but to this day, it is still the highest viewed NCAA game in all of history. Magic and Michigan State took home the national championship, right as he was about to make his entry into the NBA. Over the next few seasons, Magic and Bird would take the NBA by storm, as Johnson led his team to the title in 1980, then Bird Celtics won in 1981, and then Magic's Lakers won in 1982. Almost instantaneously, they had become the two biggest stars in the NBA. Yet despite their individual rivalry and their continual success, their teams kept narrowly avoiding each other in the NBA Finals, which was an unfortunate reality that both the league office and the general audience wanted to see rectified as soon as possible. Then, in 1984, it finally happened. Magic's Lakers and Bird's Celtics were set to square off in the NBA Finals, for what was certainly one of the most highly anticipated matchups in sports history. Up to this point, given the talent and resume of the two very proven stars, you would expect these legends to perform at their best when it absolutely mattered the most. And most of the time in this series, they did. Over the course of the series, Larry Bird averaged 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 assists, while hitting 48% of his shots, while Magic averaged 18 points, 8 rebounds, and nearly 14 assists, on 56% shooting from the field. Based on these numbers, you would think that Magic was anything but tragic in this series. But although Magic may have showed up for the big games, he shrunk in its biggest moments. After stealing Game 1 from Boston, Los Angeles had an opportunity to take a stronghold of the series by winning Game 2 on the road as well. The score was tied at 113 with only 13 seconds left on the clock, and what Magic proceeded to do next was shockingly uncharacteristic of him.
You watch the clock at the lower part of your screen. They're looking for Kareem. Magic Johnson keeps looking inside. 2 seconds, 1 second, and they don't get it off.
Magic simply dribbled out the clock in one of the most perplexing decisions in basketball history. Now in overtime, with less than a minute remaining, Magic missed a wide open jumper that would have put the Lakers up by 3. Then, on the other end of the court, Magic is late to close out on Scott Wedman, who hits the game-winning jumper for Boston. Now the Lakers would bounce back for Game 3 in Los Angeles, as they blew the Celtics out 137 to 104. But then, in Game 4, the game was close, and Magic would find himself in a similar situation to Game 2. Once again, the game was tied at 113, and yet again, Magic disappointed and left his fans stunned.
Rambis to Magic. To be sure they won't let the time run out this time as they did in Game 2. 8 seconds. Harris steals the ball and the Celtics call a timeout with 3 seconds to play.
The game went to overtime, and the score is tied at 123 with only 35 seconds left on the clock. Now Magic is at the free throw line where he continued to crumble under the pressure. Looking at this man at the line, and based on the fear in his eyes, you wouldn't know that he was already a 3-time champion and once won the Finals MVP at just the age of 20. Then on the other end, Larry Bird buried the game-winning fadeaway right over the top of Magic Johnson. The energy, effort, and execution was so lacking for Magic in these instances that many basketball fans have gone on to speculate that this whole thing was fixed, and that Magic allegedly threw the game on purpose. As wild as that sounds, it somehow seems even more plausible when you consider just how bad the Hall of Fame point guard looked in the most pivotal moments. Even with these unforced errors in Game 2 and Game 4, Magic and the Lakers still somehow forced a Game 7 in Boston. Yet again, the game was close, and with less than 2 minutes remaining, Magic had the opportunity to redeem himself in an epic fashion. But instead, he solidified one of the greatest choke jobs in basketball history.
Here's can cut it to 3 with a minute and a half now remaining. Magic Johnson goes up without the ball, and here's Dennis Johnson 2-on-1 break. And a block by Cooper. What a play by Cooper. He saved the basket, a sure basket by Boston. Worthy coming back, hits the jumper, and it's a 3-point game. 105-102. 109 remaining. 16 on the shot clock. Celtics with only one more timeout. Lakers have a luxury there. Bird. And Rambis. Now Johnson with the ball. The Lakers trying to cut it to 1. And he loses it. Again to Dennis Johnson, who's going in against Cooper again.
These were not just mistakes, but they were horrible, uncoordinated, boneheaded plays that you would never expect in a million years from the game's greatest floor general. The Celtics ran away with it, winning the deciding 7th game with a final score of 111 to 102. For an entire offseason, Irvin Johnson, the man who was once given the nickname Magic due to his dazzling wonders on the court, was now given a new name, Tragic Johnson. According to Magic, he cried all summer long. He loved to be loved, but with this loss, with his new identity, and with the media scrutiny, he entered the most depressing offseason of his entire life up to this point. If you didn't know the player, and were told that a guy had these averages over the course of an NBA Finals series, you would think that it would be considered by many as one of the greatest playoff performances of all time. But in reality, because of a few major blunders in crunch time, it simply earned him the nickname Tragic. Obviously, Magic bounced back the following season, leading his team to 62 wins and eventually the NBA championship, where he got his revenge on Bird and the Celtics. Thanks to a strong second half of his career, Magic was able to make many people forget about the worst part of his career as a pro. But at the very least, for a small window of time, the basketball world viewed this superstar as the very definition of a choker. So what do you guys think? Do you hold the 1984 NBA Finals against Magic? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. James Harden's career has become one of the most controversial in NBA history. This is a guy who is undeniably on the short list of the greatest scorers of all time. He's one of only 3 players in NBA history to score 36 or more points per game in a season. Between the 2010 to 2011 and the 2019 to 2020 seasons, no player in the NBA scored more points than the Beard. This amazing gift to put the ball in the basket has allowed Harden to see the playoffs in all 16 years of his career. But sadly, that's where the praise ends. Because when it comes to playoff basketball, James Harden has built a reputation that no superstar wants. In fact, he might just be the worst playoff performer of any superstar in NBA history. Now sure, if you look at the numbers without the context, you might think that's an exaggeration. Of the guys with over 100 playoff games played, Harden is one of only 4 players to average what he has or better in the playoffs. But this far from tells the story. Today, we're doing a deep dive into how and why James Harden has earned this underwhelming reputation. We're going to look at some of his absolute worst playoff performances. And honestly, there are a lot of them spread out across almost every single playoff run that he's had. I'm not kidding. Putting this list together took way longer than I thought it would. So settle in and get comfortable, because you're about to see just how many historically bad playoff games this man has had. 2012 NBA Finals, Games 3 and 4. We start all the way back in 2012, when Harden was just 22 years old and was playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He had been named the 6th Man of the Year for the regular season, and was exceptional off the bench in the Western playoffs, scoring double figures in every game. But when the NBA Finals came around, the pressure seemed to hit hard. In both Game 3 and Game 4, Harden shot just 2 of 10 from the field. That's 2 straight Finals games where a young Harden completely disappeared. The Heat would win the series in Game 5, and even though many would give him a pass due to his age, this was the first sign that maybe the lights were just a bit too bright for James Harden. 2013 First Round, Games 4 and 6. Jumping ahead to the 2013 Western Conference First Round, now facing the Thunder, his former team at this point, as Harden was traded to Houston after the 2012 Finals. Now the Rockets actually won this game, avoiding a sweep by the Thunder, but it was despite James Harden, not because of him. He had a rough shooting night, going just 4 for 12 from the field and missing all 4 of his 3-point attempts. Harden would also set the Rockets franchise record for turnovers in a playoff game, with a terrible total of 10. He was simply giving the ball away left and right. Then came Game 6 of that same series, and this one stings a little bit more. Harden put up 26 points, which doesn't sound terrible on the surface. But dig a little deeper and you'll see he needed a whopping 22 shots to get there, shooting just 31.8% from the field. And when the pressure was on in the second half, which will be a reoccurring theme of this video, he went ice cold, hitting only 3 of his 11 shots. To top it all off, he had 4 turnovers as his former team, the Thunder, sent the Rockets packing. Scoring 26 points on that many shots in an elimination game is never the performance you're looking for from your leader. 2014 First Round, Game 2. Against the Blazers, Harden put up 18 points on 19 shots, just 31.6% shooting, and he added 5 turnovers. The real heartbreak, though, came in Game 6 of that series. Damian Lillard hit a game winner to end Houston's season. And while Harden had a decent game on offense, his defense was objectively awful, as he was targeted possession after possession down the stretch. 2015 semifinals, Game 6 versus the Clippers. Alright, now we get to a game that had to be on the list. The Rockets were facing elimination, and Harden was having an absolute nightmare of a second half. He started the third quarter going just 1 of 7 from the field. Things got so bad that the coach, Kevin McHale, actually benched James Harden to start the fourth quarter of an elimination game. Let that sink in. Your superstar, the guy you have relied upon for this entire season to the tune of 27.4 points per game, is sitting on the bench when your season is on the line. And then something crazy happened. The Rockets went on a 40-15 run without their top scorer and came all the way back to win the game. The Rockets saved their season by taking Harden off the floor. 2015 Western Conference Finals, Game 5. Still alive in the playoffs, Harden had a chance to redeem himself after the mess against the Clippers. But in Game 5 against the Warriors, he had one of the worst games in NBA playoff history. He scored 14 points, shot 2 of 11 from the field, and get this, he set an NBA record for the most turnovers in a playoff game with 12. With yet another awful performance in a must-win playoff game, this was the season where many began to consider him as a quote playoff choker. 2017 semifinals, games 5 and 6 against the Spurs. In game 5, Harden actually had a decent first half, but then the wheels completely fell off in the second half and overtime. The Bears scored a grand total of 10 points on just 3 of 8 shooting, and to add insult to injury, he got absolutely stuffed by a 39-year-old Manu Ginobili on the very last play of the game, sealing the loss for the Rockets. And then came Game 6, and it was an absolute disaster. The Spurs were without their main star, Kawhi Leonard, so many expected Harden, like many greats before him, to come out strong after a tough loss and get the Rockets to a Game 7 in dominant fashion. In reality, however, San Antonio absolutely demolished the Rockets, winning 114-75, and Harden had just 10 points on 2 of 11 shooting with 6 turnovers. Harden looked helpless as the Rockets were again blown out in an elimination game, this time at home. 2018 Western Conference Finals, Game 7 versus the Warriors. This game is most remembered for the Rockets missing an unbelievable 27 consecutive three-point shots. And who was leading the charge for those misses? You guessed it, James Harden, who was desperately needed because his co-star Chris Paul got hurt in Game 6. He missed 10 consecutive three-pointers during that brutal stretch. While the entire team struggled, as the leader and primary ball handler, Harden, who won his first scoring title, must assume a large share of the blame for not finding alternative ways to score points and rally his teammates, as it would be expected of any superstar of his caliber. The Rockets had a chance to reach the NBA Finals and be the team that ended the Warriors' dynasty. But unfortunately, at this point, James Harden almost felt cursed as soon as the regular season ended each year. 2019 first round, Game 3. Now the Rockets actually won this game against the Utah Jazz, so it might seem weird to include it, but Harden was historically bad. He missed his first 15 shots in a row. That's the most consecutive missed shots to start a playoff game in NBA history. He ended up shooting just 3 of 20 from the field. To put that in perspective, of all players who have taken at least 20 shots in a playoff game over the last 30 years, only Karl Malone in 1997 and Kenyon Martin in 2003 had worse shooting percentages. 2021 semifinals, Game 5 versus the Bucks. Now this one has a bit of an asterisk because Harden was clearly playing hurt. He suffered a hamstring injury early in Game 1 and missed several games. He tried to come back in Game 5 for Brooklyn, but he was clearly not himself. He went just 1 of 10 from the field, missed all 8 of his three-point attempts, and he had 4 turnovers, all while clearly hobbling around on one leg. The Nets actually won this game, which is kind of amazing considering how poorly their star player performed. You almost have to wonder if they wouldn't have been better off without Harden playing as an obvious decoy. 2022 semifinals, Games 5 and 6 versus the Heat. Game 5 was just an all-around brutal performance. Harden, now playing for the 76ers, scored just 14 points on 5 of 13 shooting, and yet again completely disappeared in the second half, going just 1 of 5 from the field. He also had 4 turnovers and a plus-minus of -29. The Sixers got absolutely hammered, losing by 35 points in a pivotal 5th game with the series tied 2-2. But somehow, Game 6 might have been even worse. In an elimination game at home, James Harden went completely scoreless in the entire second half. He took only 2 shots, again seeming like a shell of the man who could still play at a high level in the regular season. He finished with a -16 plus-minus, as the Celtics sent the Sixers home in 6. 2023 semifinals, Game 7 versus the Celtics. Another Game 7, another disappointing performance from Harden. He scored just 9 points on 3 of 11 shooting and had 5 turnovers. And just like in countless years before, he struggled in the second half in a way that was jarring, making only 1 out of his 3 shots when the pressure was at its highest. 2024 first round, Game 5 versus the Mavericks. It was a crucial Game 5 with the series tied. Harden put up a meager 7 points on just 2 of 12 shooting. He went 0 of 3 in the second half and had 4 turnovers. The Clippers got blown out by 30 points, and Harden's lack of offensive production was a major factor, which at this point was basically a guarantee if the beard was on your team. 2025 first round, Game 7 versus the Nuggets. Another Game 7, another Harden letdown. With everything on the line, he scored just 7 points and went 2 of 8 from the field. No urgency, no takeover. Just another disappointing finish to another disappointing playoff run. I just went through 13 different playoff runs where James Harden didn't just have a bad game, but a historic meltdown in some of the biggest games of his entire career. But what does this all mean? I think James Harden is a legendary scorer, a worthy former league MVP, and a future Hall of Famer. But when you go down this list, when you look at how often he came up short in a multitude of ways, it's hard to ignore this unfortunate pattern when thinking about his basketball legacy. Now I understand, bad games happen to every great player. Michael Jordan once went 9 of 35 in a loss in the 1997 Eastern Conference Finals. LeBron, of course, has the 2011 NBA Finals, and they called Magic Tragic Johnson for an entire year after the 1984 Finals. Having said that, the difference between these legends and James Harden lies in the fact that his worst games became almost certain to occur in the biggest moments. Not once or twice in his career, but so often that we now expect him to not come up big when the games matter the most. And that's why, no matter how great he's been in the regular season, when it comes to the playoffs, James Harden has likely become the worst playoff superstar of all time. So what do you guys think? Is there anyone who can challenge Harden for the title of the worst playoff superstar? Today's video is one of the saddest videos that I've ever had to make. And just so you guys know, I am not writing a script for this video. This is just me talking into a mic, sharing my thoughts, because this is an emotional topic for me, and I thought communicating it genuinely with the emotion involved would be the best way to do this. It is officially NBA All-Star Weekend, and I don't care. I do not care. Do you know how crazy that is for me to say, as someone who has been a basketball superfan for his entire life? If you had told me 30 years ago I would no longer care about the NBA All-Star Game, I would have told you that you were crazy. When I was a little kid, NBA All-Star Weekend was like my own personal Christmas celebration. I made sure that nothing else was going on during that weekend. I wasn't playing any video games, I wasn't hanging out with any friends, and I sure as heck wasn't doing any work. I made sure that all of that time was opened up so that I can sit in front of my TV and enjoy everything from the weekend. And I mean everything. I would watch the hours of pregame leading up to the event. I'd watch those stupid celebrity games. I'd watch the rookie game, the skills challenge, the dunk contest, the three-point shootout, and of course the All-Star game. And then I'd get very sad when it was over and couldn't wait for next year to come around. These are some of the VHS tapes that my dad recorded of NBA All-Star games, And more so than any games that my dad ever recorded, I watched these All-Star games on repeat. This was some of the ways that I learned about these players' skills and tendencies that I now talk about frequently in my videos. The thing is, back then, you had this collection of all-star talent all coming together and putting on a good show for the audience. And I think most of us can agree that that hasn't been the case in recent years. Obviously, the three biggest events of All-Star Weekend are the three-point shootout, the dunk contest, and the actual All-Star game. So let's start with the three-point shootout. This is the one that's actually still decently entertaining for me. Unfortunately, it's a pretty common occurrence that the best three-point shooters in the NBA don't actually participate in the three-point shootout. Now, one of the major drawbacks is the fact that it's now difficult to compare modern players to players of generations past because of the ways the three-point shootout has changed. Now there's entire money ball racks, there's three-point shots attempted from further out, and there simply isn't an equal amount of shots taken, and now guys are having rounds much higher than that of generations past purely because of the inflation. Now if I want to know if a guy did better than past scores from Larry Bird, Reggie Miller, or Craig Hodges, I basically have to turn into a mathematician and adjust for all the different rule changes, all the extra shots, and the much greater distance for some of those shots. And even then, it's not really a fair comparison. So the one event that I can actually still draw some entertainment from, unfortunately, doesn't have the historical value that it once did. We can never see NBA players from the 1980s go against NBA players from the 2020s. They played in different eras. They have a different set of skills. There are things that you just can't compare. But up until recently, the NBA three-point shootout was one of those things that you could compare, as every player had the same amount of time, was taking the same amount of shots, and the scores were tracked the same way. But now that's no longer the case, which means that one of the timeless comparisons that we could actually hold on to as NBA fans is now gone forever. Then there's the NBA Slam Dunk Contest. The first dunk contest I ever watched as a kid was the 1988 NBA Dunk Contest in Chicago. That one is simply one of the greatest dunk contests of all time, as it was a classic battle between Dominique Wilkins and Michael Jordan. What you need to understand is these guys were both MVP candidates, and were two out of the top 4 best players in the entire Eastern Conference. Players of this caliber haven't been participating and competing against one another in the dunk contest for a very, very long time at this point. So when we see some players who are technically not even NBA players come in and make some dunks that aren't nearly as impressive as some of the dunks I've seen on YouTube, you can kind of understand why it's a bit underwhelming. We want to see some of the best players in the NBA be the players who are competing in the dunk contest. If we're being honest, some of Michael Jordan's dunk contest dunks are not close to being the greatest dunks in dunk contest history. But the reason why they're so iconic, and the reason why that image has been burned into our memory for so many years, is because it was done by Michael Jordan. So until the NBA brings back some of the star players to actually compete, like say Giannis, Anthony Edwards, or LeBron James, then I will continue to not be interested, as I could easily find way better dunk compilations on YouTube. And then there's the actual All-Star Game, which is insanely gimmicky at this point. In case you didn't know, once again, the All-Star Game format is not East versus West, but instead, the 3 teams, and yes, you heard that correctly, 3 teams are decided by Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Shaquille O'Neal. And based on how they drafted the players, I have some questions about whether or not this whole thing was orchestrated. So now we're just doing more gimmicks, which seems like it's the equivalent of giving a Flintstones vitamin to someone who has a broken femur. NBA All-Star Weekend is struggling, and last season's All-Star Game was widely recognized as one of the worst All-Star Games of all time. That's because absolutely no defense was played. It was either a layup drill or simply shoot around, and both teams combined for nearly 400 points. And this was after Adam Silver had been telling us for weeks that they would make defense an emphasis, that he had spoken with the referees and he had spoken with the players, and more effort was going to be put forth. And don't get me wrong, I don't want the NBA All-Star Game to have 1980s defense. but just a little bit of effort. At least look like you're trying to stand in a guy's path. I understand it's entertainment, I understand it's an exhibition, and I understand that the players want to put on a good show for the fans. But a layup drill or a shoot around is not that, and we've been saying that for years. After we got that disappointment, and after Adam Silver had egg on his face, did he then bring the hammer down and put an even greater emphasis on defense? No, he just got incredibly gimmicky with it to a level that we've never seen before. And if they didn't give a darn in the previous format, then what's supposed to make me think that they're gonna give a darn in this format? To me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because it was no longer about the fact that I was being disappointed and I wasn't being entertained. But now I was lied to, and that lie has been swept under the rug. Let me know in the comments section below how you guys are feeling about All-Star Weekend. Do you care? Do you kind of care? Or do you not care at all? I've been an NBA basketball fan for a very long time at this point. I'm about 35 years old, and I remember vividly the debates we had in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And other people who are my age or older in the comments section can back me up on this, but we didn't argue about our favorite players the same way that we argue about players today. Sure, I remember conversations about Tracy McGrady and Kobe Bryant and which one was better, but at the same time, I could still admit that Kobe was a bit of a ball hog at times, and that there were some instances where it would have been smarter just to dump the ball down to Shaq. Nowadays, basketball fandom has become so tribalistic that if I make comments like that with any hint of objectivity, I'll be called a hater and immediately get accused of being a LeBron James fan. So now basketball discourse is in a total mess, and that's been a major topic of discussion over the last week on social media. Some people want to blame the old heads for their grumpy nostalgia and how they're constantly hating on the younger players. And then some people want to blame the newer players and fans for their insulting disrespect of previous generations. But I gotta be honest, I think these are two sides of the same coin. In the 1990s, there were still former players like Wilt Chamberlain and Julius Erving who was in fact calling the 90s soft and saying that the modern players couldn't hang in their era. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make the point that the 90s are the same as basketball today. I'm just trying to make the point that this kind of rhetoric has been going on for a very long time. But over time, these debates have devolved into insults and into tribalistic sheep-like thinking. Just like you guys, I have peers who are so obsessed with LeBron James that in order to diminish Michael Jordan, they have tried invalidating his entire era time and time again. Even though, in reality, LeBron and Michael Jordan did compete against a lot of the same competition. And then on the opposite end, I have a lot of peers who are big fans of Michael Jordan, and they are so devoted to their GOAT that they can't bring themselves to say anything positive about LeBron James. I think if they just took a moment to try to acknowledge that he's a good passer, they would spontaneously be engulfed in flames. I understand that both of these sides have some faults, but if you're exclusively blaming one side or the other, then I think you're truly missing the real puppeteer in this situation. Both of these sides have been influenced by the media. As much as I try to remain as objective as possible on my channel, I can even admit that I've been influenced by the mainstream media. For example, whenever they say something incredibly stupid, I usually make a video responding to it. In a way, I am contributing to the discourse by even acknowledging it. The thing is, the discourse and bias has gotten so bad that it's nearly impossible to completely ignore as a content creator who is discussing modern trends. The truth is, the mainstream media has gotten so out of hand, and if you want to look at how basketball discourse has changed, you first have to examine how they've changed. Back in the day, we did have SportsCenter, we had After the Horn, we had PTI, and various shows on ESPN. And I remember when cold pizza first started taking off, and it was this fun, hilarious new thing where Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless were constantly yelling at each other. With that being said, there was only so much of this that I could take, because it was obvious that they were playing a part, and their opinions were dramatized to say the least. But unfortunately, as time went on, that became the norm for mainstream sports media. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember shows like NBA Open Court, where legends of the game were talking about their eras and about present NBA basketball, and they were sharing their experiences and comparisons as everybody around the room was talking positively about the game of basketball. It was purely for the love of the sport. Former players appreciating current players and drawing comparisons to greats of past generations. And now it's not on the air anymore. But you can find these knuckleheads constantly arguing and repeating the same talking points over and over for 5 days a week. I'm talking about guys like Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharpe, Skip Bayless, and Nick Wright. Some of the most biased NBA, quote, analysts that you will ever come across. As social media took off, these mainstream networks started realizing that they don't just want you to see the highlights and appreciate the players, but they want you to be talking, arguing, engaging, and nothing raises engagement like conflict. Now take this next point of mine with a major grain of salt. But a friend of mine once said that he had a friend who worked for ESPN. And again, anybody can be embellishing the details here, but he told me that his friend who worked at ESPN said that the way they came up for their topics of debate was by simply jumping on Twitter and seeing what people were arguing about. Then they would decide on that spot who's taking each side of the debate, and then they would go from there. Allegedly, it's all fabricated, it's all rehearsed. There's no authenticity, just manufactured conflict to entice viewers and create more conflict in the basketball community. Now listen, I always suspected that this was the case, but the moment I knew it beyond a shadow of a doubt was when Skip Bayless pulled this BS in 2019. After Kawhi Leonard joined the Los Angeles Clippers, Skip Bayless walks on set wearing a Kawhi Leonard jersey. Now remember the context of this time period. Skip Bayless, who had been rooting for Tim Duncan and the San Antonio Spurs, had been taking a dump on Kawhi Leonard time and time again, as he left the Spurs on very ugly terms. Skip Bayless was his #1 hater day after day after day. But it was at this time that Kawhi Leonard had just led the Toronto Raptors to their first championship in franchise history. And he did it with one of the most impressive playoff runs in NBA history, as he was frequently drawing comparisons to Michael Jordan. At that time, in that specific window in history, people were genuinely wondering if Kawhi Leonard had surpassed LeBron James as the best player in the NBA. So in that moment in time, it was easy to pit LeBron James of the Los Angeles Lakers against Kawhi Leonard of the Los Angeles Clippers. The hallway rivalry that we had always wanted in the NBA playoffs was now being led by the two best players in the NBA. So what does Fox Sports do in all of their wisdom? They tell Skip Bayless to now become the Kawhi Leonard guy, so that he could have daily debates with Shannon Sharpe, arguing about who's the better player. As you all know, Kawhi's stint in Los Angeles didn't go as well as initially expected. But the point is, when this originally went down, this was painfully obvious that it was manufactured. And this was a symbolic representation of everything that's wrong with basketball discourse today. These are the faces and these are the leaders of the charge who are influencing the rest of the basketball community with their talking points. Now, you can't just appreciate the greatness of Michael Jordan. You have to bring up the fact that he played against firemen and plumbers. You can't just appreciate a LeBron James moment within a LeBron James moment. You somehow have to shoehorn Michael into that conversation to create conflict. You can't just talk about a legend like Wilt Chamberlain with total respect. Now, you have to make the point that he played against players who were only 6 feet tall, even though we know for a fact that you don't actually believe that, Stephen A. Smith. Personally, I think this is the real reason why basketball discourse is now in a rut more so than ever before. But that's just me. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. As an old school basketball fan, I hear criticisms against past eras all the time, as guys like Anthony Edwards say they were not skilled, guys like JJ Redick call them plumbers and firemen, and general Gen Z fans will say that they were not athletic. The level of ignorance always leaves me dumbfounded, because it's always clear that they have no idea what they're talking about. Like when this guy on X tried to mock this white dude defending Michael Jordan, when he said that this shot would be snatched by anyone that is not an autistic janitor. Obviously, I had to educate him, and let him know that this was Brent freaking Barry, who famously won the NBA dunk contest by dunking from the free throw line with his warm-up jacket still on. That's just one of many examples of how they will make wild critiques without knowledge. This whole thing has become so exhausting, because no matter how many times we debunk these goofy narratives, the criticisms still persist. Usually, I play defense on this topic, but this time I'm playing offense, and I'm making the point that this era isn't truly the standard of skill and athleticism like they act like it is. First off, this era is as reliable as a McDonald's ice cream machine. Guys are load managing with extreme frequency, trying to manage their health and keep themselves in the best shape possible for the games that matter the most. And even with that being the case, superstar players like Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, and Kawhi Leonard struggle to remain healthy. How are you going to brag about this era, talking about modern medicine and how the general athlete has evolved, when many of them have the durability of a crispy Dorito? Last season, only 17 players played in all 82 games, and 30 years before that, that number was 47. Beyond simply the durability, look at the physical fitness. Guys like Luka Doncic, James Harden, and Zion Williamson are constantly seeing their weight fluctuate. These are supposed to be some of the greatest athletes in the world, and in most off seasons, it seems like they spend more time in the pantry than in the weight room. It's not only the physical fitness, but it's also the overall athleticism, or lack thereof. Look at the two best players in the game today, Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic. The Joker has no muscle definition whatsoever, and is far from what you'd call peak athletic performance. Luka Doncic also has almost no muscular definition at all. His vertical leap is nothing impressive, and he's painfully slow. 30 years earlier, the best players in the game were guys like Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and Karl Malone. Large, strong, and athletic freaks, who you would never accuse of skipping a workout. Clearly, those old school players couldn't survive in this modern era, because how would they ever keep up with this blistering speed? Speaking of which, Kyle Anderson is a 6'9" player, and honestly, he might be the slowest small forward in NBA history. Yet he's extremely effective in this modern NBA of super athletes. Make it make sense. Steph Curry is the only unanimous MVP in NBA history, and he's so athletic that he struggles to dunk a basketball. Rudy Gobert is the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, and one of the most impactful players in the modern game. And that's even with the fact that he can't dribble, and has basically no bag on offense. Several months ago, young fans were saying we're done with the 90s, like a bunch of mindless sheep, and were claiming en masse that Michael Jordan had no left hand. That was quickly debunked by people who actually know basketball. But the funniest part is that they have the nerve to say this while one of the highest paid players in NBA history, and the guy who is the finals MVP in this modern league, is a player who in fact has no left hand. Look at this right here. Yeah, I'm sure there's layup drills out there just like this from Michael Jordan. I'm sure they'll turn up on YouTube eventually. How about this? The best shot blocking perimeter player in the NBA today is Derek White, and he's a 6'4" player. He's literally 3 inches shorter than the average NBA player in today's league, yet he's regularly hosting block parties due to the incompetence of the current offensive players. In last year's playoffs, the guy who was supposed to be the next Michael Jordan and the next Kobe Bryant couldn't even get past half court in the second half of games, due to how much his conditioning and stamina sucked. Yeah, this is a guy who said that Michael Jordan couldn't guard him. I can only imagine how much MJ would struggle to contain a guy with this kind of motor. Go easy on him, Anthony. I can't blame him for his lack of stamina when the modern league sets the bar so low. Last season, not a single player averaged at least 38 minutes per game. 30 years before that, there was 10 players who averaged above 38. Here's something else to consider. The expectations of the modern superstar player are laughable compared to years past. Nowadays, you don't even have to play defense to be praised by the masses. That's how low the bar is. Last season, there were 9 players who earned MVP votes, and not a single one of them earned an all-defensive selection. 30 years before that, 4 out of the top 6 MVP vote getters were also on the NBA's all-defense teams. Back then, star players were good enough to do both. You know what else is raising the bar in the modern NBA? Yep, you guessed it, nepotism. The standard for the modern pro is so high that Giannis's older brother, Damian Lillard's cousin, Steph Curry's brother-in-law, and LeBron's son can all take up roster spots with their greatness, further putting the old heads to shame. Guys nowadays are so insanely skilled that they're regularly incorporating flopping into their game as a way to bail themselves out and get unearned trips to the free throw line. Guys are so skilled in the modern league that the NBA has allowed them to have 2 to 3 extra steps, just to make scoring that much easier. After all, nothing emphasizes a guy's deep bag quite like incredibly weak rules. You guys get the point. The same stupid logic that condemns players from previous generations can easily be done to condemn this current generation. You might assume that the entirety of this video is going to be negative and sarcastic, and the point is just one major screw you to the fans and the players of this era. But that's actually not my ultimate point. My closing point is that all of this is exactly what makes the game of basketball so beautiful. In reality, guys like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Nikola Jokic, and Luka Doncic are all the same type of athlete, in the sense that nothing about them is particularly jaw-dropping from a pure athleticism standpoint. But it's their timeless skills and their attention to detail that separates them from the rest of the crowd. The same things that made them special back then would make them special now, and the same things that make them special now would make them special back then. Basketball isn't a sport that simply rewards brute strength and raw speed, but it's an art form that's understood and mastered by the best basketball minds within the league. If it simply rewarded freakish athleticism, then guys like Shannon Brown, Gerald Green, and Darrell Griffith would be some of the greatest players of all time. There's certain things you have to have as a player to reach that level. And personally, that's the most frustrating thing about the casual fans who make these blanket criticisms of entire eras, because they're missing the nuance of what makes the game so unique. The problem with modern basketball discourse is that it's become overrun by fanboys who like their favorite player more than they like the game itself. In their minds, honest and genuine takes are not the priority, but rather it's whatever supports the guy that they're partial to. There isn't necessarily anything inherently wrong with that, but it certainly makes the entire discourse less about the nuanced aspects of the game, which is what hardcore fans like myself are here to talk about. As usual, the truth lies somewhere in the objective middle. For example, if you took a guy like Steph Curry and dropped him in the 1980s, there would be pros and there would be cons. On one hand, he would struggle to create space with his ball handling, seeing how guys could hand check him and make it difficult for him to fully utilize his dribbling skills, due to the fact that he's always being crowded by the defender. On the other hand, a player who could pull up from 30 feet out and hit that shot regularly was basically unheard of in that era. And for that reason, he would be like a force of nature that defenses would have to adapt to league-wide. To put it simply, the conversation is more complex than simply saying he would kill it or that he would be utterly destroyed by that era. For those of you who made it to the end of this video, I'm hoping that this is your takeaway. As long as I'll run this channel, my goal will always be to rein the fanboys back in and keep the conversation about the thing I love the most, the actual basketball. My mission will always be to create a space where hoop nerds can gather and talk about the game honestly, because unfortunately, those spaces are seemingly becoming rarer and rarer as time goes on. So the Milwaukee Bucks really suck. And at the time I'm making this video, they are at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and no one is more taken aback by this outcome than yours truly. I had so much confidence in not only Giannis, but in Damian Lillard, who had been one of my favorite players in the NBA for many years. and I just thought the way their games would complement one another, and with just how good Giannis was as basically the only superstar on his team for so many years, I thought for sure they were bound to be an NBA championship team with these two stars leading the pack. But clearly I was wrong, as that prediction ended up being one of the dumbest predictions that I've ever made. But after all, that's just sports. I've made predictions that made me look genius, and I've also made predictions that were so ridiculously stupid in hindsight that I basically tried to pretend for years that they never happened. Well, today, we're opening up some old wounds, as I'm going to share with you some of the dumbest predictions that I've ever made in my 30+ years of loving basketball. And listen, if you're going to continue watching this video, the only thing I ask for in return for me humiliating myself is you also telling me in the comment section below what are some of the dumbest basketball predictions that you've ever made. I look forward to everybody being a little extra humble today in the comment section below. So first off, it was early 2012, and my Los Angeles Lakers were looking to get back into title contention, and the Dwight Howard for Andrew Bynum trade had been pretty well foreshadowed at this point. It was then that I took to Facebook, and I told some friends if the Lakers managed to get Dwight Howard, then Kobe Bryant would be accumulating championship rings until he was 40. I even broke down my thoughts on how this team would flow together naturally, and you all know what happened. They ended up being one of the most disappointing teams in the history of the league. Although it's incredibly stupid in hindsight, I do have to cut myself a little bit of slack because Kobe didn't even get to play in the playoffs because of his torn Achilles, and that entire year as a whole was an absolute nightmare when it came to injuries. As Nash was dealing with injuries, Dwight Howard had a torn labrum, Pau Gasol was dealing with plantar fasciitis in his foot, and these guys basically just couldn't stay on the court together for an extended period of time. Regardless, there's no way from saving myself completely from the embarrassment, as this was easily one of the dumbest predictions I've ever made. Another prediction was around 2001, when I said that a rookie Darius Miles would go on to be as good of a player as Kevin Garnett. And I know what many of you are thinking. Who the hell is Darius Miles? Well, he was an incredibly skilled player with tons of potential. He was a 6'9" small forward who could handle the basketball and was extremely lengthy. He was very athletic, and to me, he was extremely reminiscent of a young Kevin Garnett. It was around this time that this Clippers team was actually starting to be kind of exciting, as they were starting to add a lot of quality youth, and although they weren't good yet at this time in history, there seemed to be light at the end of the tunnel, and I thought this guy would end up being a superstar who would lead them into contention. Unfortunately, a lot of issues arose, like questions about his work ethic, attitude problems with the organization, and after a couple years, he started having some significant knee injuries that really took away a lot of his explosiveness. He was 19 years old when I first made this prediction, but you could tell that his NBA career was basically over before he reached his mid-20s. And the last and possibly dumbest prediction that I've ever made in my years of being a basketball fan is that the Kawhi Leonard trade to the Toronto Raptors was going to go down as one of the dumbest moves by a general manager in the history of the league. To put it simply, I did not foresee Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors winning the NBA championship. Giving up DeMar DeRozan and separating him from Kyle Lowry after so many years of making it into the NBA playoffs, and doing all of that just for a little bit of an upgrade of a superstar player who was on the final year of his contract, just didn't make sense to me. Kawhi seemed like he was just a rental, and that part I was actually correct about. But again, Kawhi had one of the greatest postseason runs in the history of the NBA, and to my surprise, he was actually healthy throughout the entirety of it. Yes, he didn't stay with the Raptors long term, but their championship banner will hang in the rafters for decades to come. When I first made that prediction, I had just started my basketball channel, and this was the kind of moronic prediction that just played out so horribly for me that I honestly thought it might stop me from having success on YouTube. Fortunately, I've been able to move past it, and although it made plenty of sense to me at the time, I gotta give it to them, they definitely made the right move taking that risk. So now it's time for you guys to contribute your part of the trade. What are some of the dumbest basketball predictions that you've ever made? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. So just recently, I made a video where I used different players' attributes to create the greatest player possibly imaginable. I called that video, I Made the Perfect Basketball Player. Among his attributes were the size of George Marathon, the speed of Derrick Rose, the leaping ability of Vince Carter, and so on. It was a fun thought exercise that made us think, what would be the characteristics of a player if he was the perfect basketball player? The thing is, I can only use a specific player once, so I couldn't say use Michael Jordan's footwork and his fadeaway jumper. He could only have one or the other. So then this viewer in the comment section made this brilliant suggestion, and thought I should do the same exercise, but in the opposite direction. What would be the attributes of a player if we made the worst basketball player imaginable? The more I thought about this, the more hilarious it became. So I'm excited to share the attributes with you guys, and see where you agree or disagree. To start things off, if I was to create the worst basketball player of all time, he would have the height of Muggsy Bogues, who set the NBA record for being the shortest basketball player of all time, standing at only 5 foot 3 inches tall. He would have the wingspan of Spud Webb, who was also a shorter basketball player and definitely a defensive liability. He would have the frame of Oliver Miller, who was famously one of the heaviest players to ever play in this league. He would have the hand size of TJ McConnell, who has the NBA record for the smallest hand size at an NBA combine. He would have the speed of slow-mo Kyle Anderson, who is very methodical and is a quality player in his own right, but man, does he move slow. He would have the strength of Kevin Durant, who famously couldn't even lift the bar at the NBA combine. He would have the physicality of Karl Anthony Towns, the flopping of Vlade Divac, and the body control of JaVale McGee. He would have the turnover frequency of Karl Malone, and he would have the disgusting shooting form of Chuck Hayes, who has essentially the Charles Barkley golf swing of basketball shooting forms. He would have the ball handling skills, or lack thereof, of Rudy Gobert. He would have the three-point shooting of Ben Simmons, the mid-range shooting of Joakim Noah, and the dunking ability of Steve Nash. He would have the free throw shooting of Ben Wallace, who is statistically the worst free throw shooter of all time. He would have the passing skills of Yinka Dare, and if you have no idea who that guy is, you might want to look into him and you'll quickly understand why he takes this attribute. He would have the rebounding ability of Brook Lopez, the perimeter defense of Damian Lillard, and the interior defense of one of the greatest busts in basketball history, Anthony Bennett. He would have the shot blocking of George Zedek, who was an NBA center standing 7 feet tall, yet averaged a career 0.1 blocks per game. He would have the durability of Bill Walton, who was notorious for breaking more easily than a graham cracker. He would have the stamina of Boban Marjanovic. He would have the public relations of Charles Barkley, who was always getting in trouble during his playing career. So in other words, he wouldn't be a role model. He would have the confidence of Kwame Brown, or lack thereof. He would have the leadership of Scottie Pippen, and the coachability of Latrell Sprewell, who famously did really well with his head coach. He would have the attitude of Rasheed Wallace, picking up technical fouls and getting ejected with extreme regularity. He would have the explosive temper of Ron Artest, who famously has some of the most ugly moments of basketball history on his resume. He would have the basketball IQ of J.R. Smith, the work ethic of Allen Iverson, and the composure of Glenn Big Baby Davis. He would have the unselfishness of the NBA Hall of Famer Rick Barry. He would have the locker room influence of Gilbert Arenas. And I'm not even sure if I'm able to explain that one in detail in a YouTube video. Just to add insult to injury, he would have the dancing skills of Mark Madsen, he would have the playoff clutch gene of James Harden, and he would have the clutch shot making of Roy Hibbert. So be honest guys, this guy would definitely go first overall in your NBA fantasy draft. Let me know in the comments section if you guys are able to make a worse player than the attributes I put together. I look forward to seeing your pathetic custom built players in the comment section below. Thanks. Well, now I've really done it. I dared to dig into history a bit and seek out the truth, in an area that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things if we're being honest. But now, because of that, I ended up angering the basketball establishment. On both sides of the basketball community, I'm now seen as this biased propaganda pusher. The reality is, more so than ever before, basketball discourse has become extremely tribalistic. The logic is that you're either for us or against us, and no in between. I can't tell you exactly why it became this way, but my guess would be the presence of social media in our lives. Its influence and algorithms have clumped people together into echo chambers of groupthink, where diversity of thought and being your own individual are essentially frowned upon. If you're a fan of Jordan, fellow Jordan fans will assume that everything you ever say about LeBron James will be negative, and you should never acknowledge any fault in Jordan whatsoever. If you're a LeBron fan, your fellow LeBron fans will assume that you'll never speak ill of your king, because in his own words, he's never made a bad basketball decision in his entire life. Additionally, you must despise the very existence of Michael Jordan, and if anyone ever says anything positively about him, you must quickly remind them that he cheated and his competition is inferior. I gotta be honest, guys, this is all so tiresome at this point. When I was a kid, watching my dad's VHS tapes on repeat of all the basketball games he recorded, I didn't really have one single player who I adored more than any other, but I was a fan of the game. Reggie Miller was fascinating to me because he was as skinny as I was, but he was fearless out there on the court. Michael Jordan was awesome because he was the guy who had skills even beyond my imagination. Magic Johnson was incredible because he was so flashy and just amazed me how he could be the best player on the court while being a distributor. Larry Bird was just so smart, and I was so blown away by the fact that he could be so good while looking like just a regular unathletic dude. James Worthy was so fast, and I love the way he glided through the air. And I thought he was so cool with his basketball goggles that I used to casually wear my pool goggles everywhere, just so that I could look like him. That was the kind of basketball fan I was at the age of 6 and 7, and in many ways, that kid never grew up. Sure, being a fan of your favorite player is cool, but what was far more meaningful than that to me was being a fan of the game of basketball. I remember having genuine and honest basketball conversations about players' gifts and about their weaknesses. For me, how I spoke about the players didn't change the truth about who the players really were. It was just my opinion, and it was either true or it wasn't. But all of that has changed dramatically in the years since. Now it seems like everyone is a part of their own fan clubs, and everyone in that club must pledge allegiance to their favorite player. And if you stray away from loyalty to your favorite player for even just a moment, you become ostracized by the rest of the community. And that is exactly where I find myself today.
Side. I am on nobody's side because nobody is on my side.
Another way of putting it is this viral tweet. This perfectly encompasses the basketball community as a whole these days. But instead of saying, I like pancakes, it could say, I think Jordan's steals might have been inflated. And the response is, so you worship LeBron James? Or how about, I think LeBron is hurting the Lakers by controlling them? Which then gets a response like, so you intimately dream about Michael Jordan? Again, according to the basketball masses, there's no room anymore for honest free thinkers. Personally, I am very aware of this topic. Because Kobe Bryant is my favorite player, I honestly think Michael Jordan is the GOAT, and LeBron James plays for the Lakers, which is my favorite team. I basically have eggs in the baskets of each of these players' legacies. But apparently, many basketball fans are incapable of comprehending that. My mission on this channel is to be a genuine place where lovers of the game can get together and talk about the sport. Maybe it was just my friend group growing up, but from what I observed, basketball discourse wasn't always this political and cringy. We could talk about the game authentically, acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses of our favorite players. without getting so damn insecure like their reputation is about to be ruined just because we dared to be honest for a minute. If our favorite player shot 3 of 20 from the field, it's okay to admit that our guy looked awful that night and couldn't hit water if he was shooting off a boat. But now, fan bases have to convince people that their guy, quote, still had a decent game. Look at how he outworked everyone. Look at how he set screens. See how he made his teammates better? For goodness sake, just take the L. If hypothetically push comes to shove, and I end up being the last objective basketball fan in the community, then I'm okay with that. I'll die peacefully knowing that I stayed who I am despite the pressure to conform. The thing is, I think we all can enjoy the game just a little bit more if some of us just loosened up a bit. Your favorite player is probably great at the game, but he isn't perfect, and he isn't a god. And the sooner we accept this, the sooner we can be basketball fans, instead of quarrelsome fanboys. So to put this into practice, I'm going to ask us to do something weird and possibly an uncomfortable exercise for some of you. In the comments section, I want you first to say who your favorite player is, and share what you believe is a legitimate criticism about your favorite player. After we've all done that, I think we can each take a deep breath, and relax in the fact that you being honest about this player for 30 seconds didn't actually destroy his entire legacy. Kobe Bryant is my favorite player by far, and he always will be. Unfortunately, Kobe shot us in the foot in the 2004 NBA Finals. Him and Shaq had been beefing, and Shaq had been the Finals MVP for their previous 3 championships. Kobe put his motivation to get his first Finals MVP ahead of the team, and because of that, he shot the ball 30 more times than Shaq did that series, while hitting only 38% of his shots compared to Shaq's 63%. It was brutal to watch. We should have had a better shot at beating the Pistons, but we didn't because of Kobe's ego. Now again, Kobe is still my favorite player. He's a legend. He's the hardest working player I've ever seen. He's the coolest basketball player ever in my opinion. And I will still keep this picture hanging in my studio, where I can draw inspiration from all these awesome Kobe quotes. But yeah, he wasn't perfect, and I'm okay admitting that. So now it's your turn. Do you enjoy modern basketball discourse? And who is your favorite player, and what is the legitimate criticism about him? I look forward to hearing your honest thoughts in the comment section below. The flop. To many basketball fans, it's one of the most disgusting, vile, and disgraceful displays of unsportsmanlike conduct that we can witness on a frequent basis. Yet we can't deny its competitive advantage and how some have perfected it down to an art form. For those of you who don't know, a flop is basically defined as this. It's when a player makes an intentional fall or stagger after little to no physical contact by an opposing player in order to draw a foul call by an official against the opponent. By nature, it is extremely deceitful and requires plenty of dramatized acting in order to convince the official to blow the whistle. With that being said, some players are better actors than others, and some are incredibly crafty at finding creative ways to draw the foul. Some of these modern players are guys like Chris Paul, LeBron James, Marcus Smart, and of course James Harden, just to name a few. Just a quick history lesson, although flopping is more prevalent now than ever before, it's not a new phenomenon by any means. In fact, flopping in the game of basketball goes as far back as the 1960s, as former Boston Celtic and a 7-time NBA champion Frank Ramsey made it a regular part of his game. It was something he personally admitted to as he spoke about his flopping tendencies from an article in Sports Illustrated that was published in 1963. Not only was Ramsey referred to as the master of deception, but he talked about how he was often booed and heckled by the fans for his obvious acting. Given the fact that Ramsey wasn't really a superstar, and given the fact that he played basketball in the 1960s, unfortunately, there is very little footage available displaying his flopping tendencies. Although it would be nearly impossible to claim who was the first player to attempt the flop, I think it's fair to say that Ramsey was certainly one of the first floppers of NBA history. Like I said before, there wasn't a ton of flopping on a widespread level throughout the league during that era. The 70s and 80s were extremely physical decades of the NBA, and the general mentality of the players was much more focused on presenting a tougher image. Not every player shared that mindset though, as some players weren't shy about selling a bit of their integrity for the sake of a blown whistle. If you ask my personal opinion, and the opinion of many viewers who were old enough to witness this, the player who flopped more than any other, and frankly, the player who made flopping famous among basketball fans, was none other than the Serbian Vlade Divac. Vlade had a 16-year career in the NBA from 1989 to 2005, and was actually inducted to the Basketball Hall of Fame. He averaged nearly 12 points and 8 rebounds over the course of his career and was selected to one All-Star team in 2001. Vlade was obviously a solid center and was actually the player who was traded to the Charlotte Hornets for a rookie Kobe Bryant in 1996. But back when he played, what Vlade was known for more than anything else was his dramatic flopping theatrics. He was so notorious for this that I believe he was the main person who gave European basketball players their stereotype of being soft athletes. It's a stereotype that isn't very prevalent in today's game, but back in the 90s, it was an extremely common perception. Given his massive size, Vlade's consistent flopping appeared even more absurd than most other players, considering how it shouldn't be that easy to topple him over. He may have not been the first player to flop in the NBA, but in my opinion, Vlade is the player who made flopping a famous and well-known maneuver to the basketball world. As time went on, flopping became only more relevant and widespread throughout the entire league, and now it's at a point where more players flop than those who don't. Without question, Kevin Durant is one of the most skilled and special talents that the game of basketball has ever seen. You guys know all about this unicorn. He's a 7-foot sniper, a player with remarkable size and length who can move and handle the basketball like an elite guard. He's one of the most deadly scorers in the history of the sport, and he's extremely efficient from the interior, from the mid-range, and from three-point distance. Kevin has always been a top-tier offensive producer throughout his career, as he has a total of 4 scoring titles, trailing only Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain. KD is also one of the few players to ever have a 50-40-90 season, meaning he averaged at least 50% efficiency from the field, 40% efficiency from three-point range, and 90% efficiency from the free throw line over the course of an entire regular season. And he did this multiple times. I think you get the point. Kevin Durant is the very definition of a walking bucket, and with his God-given attributes, he had many convinced that he could end up being the best player in the league, the best player on a championship team, and the greatest player of his era. Unfortunately, the truth is that he was often second in most of those aspects. Let's face it, the number 2 is synonymous with the legacy of Kevin Durant. He started his career as the 2nd overall pick in the 2007 NBA draft, taken just after Greg Oden. In hindsight, KD certainly deserved to be the number 1 pick, but it would probably be unfair to call Oden a bust, because the way his career panned out had more to do with his significant injuries and not so much about any lack of amazing talent. On the other hand, a healthy Kevin Durant rose to superstardom almost immediately. By the 3rd season of his career, he was leading the NBA in scoring, averaging 30 points per game, as he took his OKC Thunder to a 50-win season, and their first playoff berth since moving to Oklahoma. With that being said, his trend of 2nd place continued, as he finished 2nd in the MVP voting that season, behind the strong MVP effort of LeBron James. This was the beginning of a 4-year stretch where KD finished 2nd in the MVP voting in 3 of those seasons. Each and every one of those 3 years, it was a prime LeBron James that was ahead of him, winning the league MVP award. If that didn't firmly establish the narrative that Durant was living in the shadow of LeBron, well then the 2012 NBA Finals certainly did. On the game's biggest stage, LeBron and the Big Three Miami Heat defeated the OKC Thunder comfortably in just 5 games. Now, was it really KD's fault that he ended up in 2nd once again? Perhaps not, as he did have great numbers in the series, and especially in the elimination game, he didn't really have the support he needed to get the job done. With that being said, he and his fellow co-stars were still only in their early 20s, and Durant specifically was 4 years younger than the prime LeBron James. So with that in mind, the widespread belief was that the day was coming where he would be seen as the number one guy. Number one in the league, number one on a championship team, and maybe even number one of his era. He had his moment to shine in the 2013 to 2014 regular season, where he averaged 32 points per game with solid efficiency splits, leading to a 59-win season for the OKC Thunder. Finally, for a brief moment in time, KD was seen as the number one guy, as he won the MVP award, finally besting a competitive LeBron James. Although he was worthy of the 2014 MVP, he wasn't without his critics, as some people believed that he was given the award as a sympathetic gesture, rather than as a genuine assessment that he had finally surpassed LeBron, who did average 27, 7, and 6 on an absurd 57% from the field that season. I do believe the majority of the optimism was in KD's favor though, but it was short-lived, as his Thunder were eliminated in the Western Conference Finals by the San Antonio Spurs, while LeBron was once again heading to the NBA Finals. We were still anxiously waiting for his true breakthrough moment. But unfortunately, significant foot injuries caused him to miss the majority of the 14-15 season. He did come back strong for the 2015 to 2016 season, but now the Golden State Warriors had emerged and were on the horizon, as Steph Curry was the reigning MVP and was in the process of winning his second straight as the first unanimous MVP in NBA history. As all of you know, KD's Thunder and Steph's 73-9 Warriors did meet up in the Western Conference Finals, and what preceded was an all-time great series. But after the Thunder got off to a commanding 3-1 lead, the Warriors stormed back and won the series. In the final 3 games of that matchup, KD shot only 39% from the field and 27% from three-point range, while over that same stretch, Steph averaged more points and was far more efficient. At this point, Kevin Durant being second place to LeBron James was now a distant memory. Now, he had to settle for being viewed as second best in his own conference. Then the Cavs upset the Warriors in the NBA Finals, and then the unthinkable happened, where Kevin Durant joined the greatest regular season team of all time, as he signed with the Warriors in July of 2016. Then Durant went on to win 2 straight championships for a team that was basically viewed as the greatest title favorites ever. Durant did win the Finals MVP in 2017 and in 2018 while putting up monstrous numbers. And at the time, a lot of people viewed this as an indication that KD was the better player than Steph. But oh how things can change in a matter of a few years. Since their split, Steph won his 4th championship ring, and KD is still seeking a championship apart from Curry, despite the fact that he's had numerous opportunities with exceptional supporting talent. So to recap, Kevin Durant was second to be drafted. Then he was second behind LeBron James for years. Then right as LeBron potentially opened the door for Durant, he became second behind Steph Curry. And then the history books will say that he was the real second behind Steph when he was on his team. And now there's a new question for KD's career. Does he have to be number 2 on a team in order to win a championship? It sounds crazy to suggest it based on his talent, but outside of Steph, who was the clear engine and identity of that Warriors offense, Kevin has been unable to secure a championship, leading to questions about his leadership. Maybe the truth is, he was never a true number 1 in the first place. There's much to be said and debated over the legacy of Kevin Durant, and when it comes to his status and standing among the all-time greats, it's really hard to give him a definitive placement, because despite all of his talent and all of his supporting talent, he has very little hardware to show for it. Ultimately, after nearly 2 decades of watching him play, I believe the legacy of Kevin Durant is perfectly summed up by 2 words, and 2 words alone: second best. As most basketball fans already know, Tracy McGrady was simply one of the most talented players to ever play the game. As Kobe Bryant once described him, he was a player who had all the skills and athleticism, but in a 6'9" frame. At his peak, he was averaging as high as 32 points per game, and he's famously known for his iconic comeback over the San Antonio Spurs, where he scored 13 points in only 35 seconds. As talented as McGrady was, his potential reached even higher. But unfortunately, his chronic back injuries disrupted his career and stunted his progression, making him one of the greatest what-ifs of basketball history. With that being said, we still got to witness McGrady perform at an elite level for roughly 7 seasons straight, and within that window, many stories and legacy-defining moments took place that much of the basketball community have since forgotten. Today, we're tackling the story of Tracy McGrady's career and evaluating the events that took place when his legacy was on the line. When McGrady entered the league, he was an 18-year-old kid straight out of high school who would take time to blossom into the superstar we know. T-Mac was only operating as a role player in his time in Toronto, while his cousin Vince Carter was operating as the franchise player and the talk of the town. In his last season as a member of the Raptors, McGrady made the NBA playoffs but was swept out of the first round in 3 games by the New York Knicks. Unfortunately, this early playoff exit would begin to become a theme of his career, a theme that would start to build a narrative about him as a player and about his legacy. In the summer of 2000, McGrady signed with the Orlando Magic, putting him in a position where he was now able to shine as the primary superstar of a team. McGrady was now averaging around 27 points per game and was proving himself to be one of the best perimeter players in the entire league. Orlando finished as a 7th seed heading into the playoffs, where they were matched up with a far more talented Milwaukee Bucks squad. It's also worth mentioning that Tracy's sidekick Grant Hill was out for the playoffs with yet another significant injury, which meant that T-Mac had to carry the team almost exclusively offensively. He put up ridiculously monstrous all-around numbers throughout the series, but ultimately it wasn't anywhere close to enough as the stacked Bucks closed out the Magic in 4 games. The following season was more of the same, as Grant Hill once again missed the entirety of the playoffs, while Tracy had to carry an Orlando squad that was pretty devoid of talent. This time, the Magic were eliminated in 4 games by the Charlotte Hornets, and McGrady once again put up insanely monstrous numbers. He consistently wasn't getting the help he needed, and as a result, this ended up being the 3rd straight season that T-Mac had been eliminated out of the first round of the playoffs. But it was in the next season where his reputation started to take some major hits. From an individual standpoint, McGrady's 02-03 season was likely the best of his career, as he put up his best regular season numbers yet. The thing is, Tracy was still missing a second star, as Grant Hill only played 29 games, which were all in the first half of the season. Orlando finished with a 42-40 record, which was good enough for only the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference and resulted in a matchup with the consistently contending Detroit Pistons. McGrady and the Magic were obviously massive underdogs in this series, and stunningly, they roared out of the gates and managed to get a 3-1 series lead over Detroit. Up to this point, Tracy looked like he was having one of the greatest playoff series in NBA history, as he dominated his way to these absurdly high and efficient numbers against arguably the best defensive team of that era. Unfortunately, the season wasn't yet over at that point, but that didn't stop McGrady from acting like it. In a controversial post-game interview, McGrady confidently stated, "It feels good to get into the second round," even though his Magic were only up 3-1. It was a classic example of pride coming before the fall, as the Pistons went on to crush the Magic in the next 3 games straight, winning by an average of 20.3 points. The series was a tale of 2 McGradys, as his last 3 games looked nothing like his first 4, as he was contained to extremely inefficient numbers by Detroit. Not only did McGrady's post-game comment age like milk, but it also started to appear like some self-induced curse, as he once again failed to get out of the first round, and the narrative was now firmly established that he was a superstar that just couldn't advance in the playoffs. What's probably worse than getting eliminated in the first round is not making the playoffs at all, which is what happened in the 03-04 season, as Orlando finished with the worst record in the Eastern Conference, despite McGrady winning his 2nd straight scoring title. At this point, Orlando's management had finally accepted the fact that they were a franchise that needed a rebuild, and traded McGrady to the Houston Rockets. T-Mac expressed his excitement to play with the new star big man Yao Ming. As a legitimate superstar duo, McGrady and Yao led the Rockets to a 51-31 record, and it appeared that McGrady might finally be in a solid position to advance beyond the first round. They were facing a solid Dallas Mavericks team whose Dirk Nowitzki was just reaching the prime of his career. T-Mac started off solid, as did his Rockets, as they stormed out to a 2-0 lead in the series. The Mavericks clawed their way back into it, and the series was heading to a deciding 7th game in Dallas. Although T-Mac had played incredible throughout the majority of the series and had put up his usual strong postseason numbers, he picked the wrong time and place to come out cold, as Tracy missed his first 7 shots of the 7th game. Houston could never find their groove, and the Mavericks completely demolished McGrady and the Rockets, winning the deciding game by a whopping 40 points. At this point in history, many basketball fans, including myself, were confused as to what to make of Tracy McGrady. On one hand, he appeared to be one of the greatest talents that the game of basketball had ever seen, and consistently produced tremendous postseason numbers. But on the other hand, for one reason or another, he just couldn't get past the first round of the playoffs, as he was now 0-5 in his first round appearances. In the following season, Houston was hit with a slew of injuries, including the first major one to Tracy McGrady, as it was the beginning of his devastating back injuries that would ultimately cut his career short. Due to this, the 05-06 Rockets missed the playoffs entirely, finishing with only a 34-48 record. The Rockets franchise was able to bounce back in the 06-07 season, as Yao Ming had a breakout year, asserting himself as Houston's #1 scoring option. T-Mac was still a legitimate weapon, but with his back issues still lingering, he saw a significant drop in his regular season production. With that being said, together, Yao and McGrady led the Rockets to a 52-30 record, good enough for the 5th seed in the West playoffs. Prior to the start of their first round series with Utah, McGrady was being interviewed by ESPN's own Stephen A. Smith. And in the interview, Stephen A. didn't waste any time acknowledging the elephant in the room, T-Mac's inability to lead his team past the first round up until this point. A confident yet agitated McGrady responded with this.
It's on me. If we don't get out of the first round, it's on me. Wait a minute. If we don't get out of the first round this year, it's on me.
It's pretty incredible to see such a bold statement from a superstar like McGrady. It's not often that athletes bet on themselves with such ownership and such a sense of responsibility. The pressure was immense, and almost everyone in the basketball world was waiting to see how it unfolded. Through the first 6 games, McGrady was getting his numbers, but he was doing it at a high volume of shots, as he wasn't shooting the ball very efficiently at all. Fortunately, he was actually getting help from a solid supporting cast, and as a result, the series was tied at 3 games apiece heading into the 7th and deciding game. The pressure for him had never been more intense than it was in this game, and under these extreme circumstances, McGrady produced, finishing Game 7 with 29 points, 13 assists, 5 rebounds, and 3 blocks on 48% shooting. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough, as Utah Stars had individual performances for the ages. After this close defeat, McGrady had been eliminated from the first round in all 6 appearances of his career. A clearly emotional McGrady was trying hard to keep his composure in the press conference afterwards. But as soon as the questions started to come, T-Mac simply left without answering the question, saying emotionally, this was beyond devastating. Not only was it yet another first round defeat, but McGrady's team had a 2-game series lead in 2003, 2005, and 2007, and went on to lose each and every series. The following year, Houston would get a rematch with the Utah Jazz in the first round of the playoffs. But tragically, Yao Ming's season was shut down 2 months before the playoffs began due to a stress fracture in his left foot. This meant that a shorthanded McGrady had to do his best to carry the offense for the Rockets. But ultimately, despite a pretty solid series performance, McGrady was eliminated for the 7th time from the first round, as the Jazz comfortably closed it out in 6 games. From this point on, Tracy's career wouldn't be about his early playoff exits, but rather about his early regular season exits due to his severe back injuries. Over the next 4 seasons, McGrady's game declined to a role player's level of contribution, and he missed 139 regular season games, and wouldn't get another true taste of playoff basketball. Eventually, in 2013, he was signed by the San Antonio Spurs and was activated just in time for the playoffs. He only saw roughly 25 total garbage time minutes in that postseason, and never scored a single point, as he was only a shell of what he once was. But technically, it did at least allow him to play beyond the first round of the playoffs, since the Spurs went all the way to the NBA Finals that season, before eventually being eliminated in 7 games by the Big Three's Miami Heat. With that, he had played his final minutes of NBA basketball in only his early 30s. So as you can see, T-Mac had one of the most tragic and confusing legacies that the game has ever seen. Although legends like Kobe Bryant have praised him for being the most difficult player he's ever had to guard, T-Mac is also the star who couldn't advance in the playoffs no matter how many opportunities he was presented with. So what do you guys think? Was McGrady unable to advance in the playoffs simply because of all of the bad circumstances, like injuries and lacking supporting casts, or was there something about him as a player that kept him from getting it done? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.
Throughout the decades, there have been many disappointing NBA franchises. Several organizations have a reputation of consistent losing. But in order to take the title of the most cursed franchise in NBA history, a team has to have more than just consistent failure. It needs to have the expectations and potential set to astronomically high levels just to end up falling tremendously short. One specific organization fits that description to a T: the Portland Trail Blazers. Yes, Portland has one lone championship banner hanging up in the rafters, but that title goes all the way back to the year 1977, and considering the opportunities they've had, this is a franchise that should have many Larry O'Brien trophies, not just one. In order to understand just how far the franchise fell from its potential, we have to take it all the way back to the team's inception. The Portland Trail Blazers started as an NBA expansion team in the 1970-71 season. Like most expansion teams, the Blazers struggled out of the gates, as they missed the playoffs in their first 6 seasons of existence. Fortunately, they had one of the all-time great centers by the name of Bill Walton. With Walton at the helm, the Blazers achieved the unexpected and won the NBA championship in the 1977 season. The Blazers started the following season looking as if they were ready to repeat, and through the first 60 games, they had a 50-10 record. At this point, many people in basketball circles were predicting this team to be an NBA dynasty. Unfortunately, this is where everything began to go downhill. Walton suffered a broken left ankle that caused him to miss the remainder of the season. This certainly wasn't anything out of the ordinary for Walton, as the guy has an injury history long enough to make even Anthony Davis blush. The thing is, Walton suffered so many reoccurring injuries that he began blaming the Blazers medical team and demanded that the organization trade him. Having recently won the championship, Portland's management was hesitant to trade their superstar big man, so in a protest, Walton sat out the entirety of the 78-79 season. By that point, Walton was now a free agent and signed with the San Diego Clippers. If there was anyone who put a curse on the Portland franchise, it was probably Bill Walton on his way out the door, as the Blazers have struggled to replicate their success ever since. After many years of missing the playoffs or early postseason exits, the Blazers found themselves in the 1984 draft with the 2nd overall pick. The incredible Hakeem Olajuwon had just been taken with the first pick by the Houston Rockets. Now remaining on the board was the hyped 7'1" prospect out of Kentucky, Sam Bowie, and then some shooting guard named Michael Jordan. With Portland on the clock, management considered the fact that they already had a young phenom by the name of Clyde Drexler at the shooting guard position. So instead of taking Jordan, they decided to select the big man Bowie in order to fill their lacking center position. This is yet another great example of why you should draft players based on their talent and not by your position needs. Bowie went on to be a bust, as he not only struggled with injuries, but he also failed to live up to the production levels that scouts expected. Meanwhile, Michael Jordan simply went on to be the consensus greatest player of all time. This was a mistake that still haunts Portland to this very day, but unfortunately, this wasn't the last time that they would make this kind of mistake. More on that in a bit. With an extremely talented roster, led by all-stars like Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter, the Blazers made it to the NBA Finals twice, in 1990 and in 1992. Unfortunately, they ran into two juggernauts. They were defeated by Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons in 1990, and then defeated by Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in 1992. From this point on, the Blazers would consistently make the playoffs, but were never really considered again as true title contenders until around the year 2000. Led by players like Scottie Pippen, Rasheed Wallace, Arvydas Sabonis, and Damon Stoudemire, the 99-2000 Blazers won 59 regular season games and had a strong advantage late into the postseason. In Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers, Portland had a 13-point lead at the end of the third quarter, and momentum was clearly on their side. In the fourth quarter, things took a dramatic turn for the worse. Many people think the refereeing in this game was questionable, or even rigged, as the NBA may have had an agenda to get the Lakers to the finals. That may or may not have been the case. But what was even more questionable than the refs' motives was the Blazers' ability to handle the pressure, as they went completely scoreless for an 8-minute stretch in that fourth quarter, including 13 straight missed field goal attempts. Needless to say, the Blazers choked away the game as the Lakers went on to win the NBA championship. Despite having a deep and talented roster worthy of a championship, the early 2000s Blazers just couldn't stop stumbling over their own feet, as the team was deeply affected by their off-the-court issues, which earned them the nickname the Jailblazers. Along with that, they lacked maturity late in games, as players like Rasheed Wallace were consistently receiving technical fouls at a record rate. Based on their depth and their talent, this squad should have won a title. But instead, by the mid-2000s, the franchise was completely in rebuild mode. They appeared as if they were finally ready to turn their misfortunes around, as they had the first overall pick of the 2007 NBA Draft. History would repeat itself though, as Portland once again had their eyes set on a 7-foot big man, this time a player by the name of Greg Oden. They took Oden with the first pick, and the player they passed up to do so was the incredible scoring assassin Kevin Durant. Due to his various injuries, Oden would only play 105 regular season games in his very short basketball career, and he had completely retired from the NBA by only the age of 26. Meanwhile, Kevin Durant would go on to be a 2-time NBA champion, a 2-time Finals MVP, an MVP, and is now widely recognized as one of the greatest players of all time. It was just like Sam Bowie and Michael Jordan all over again. Even though they botched yet another golden opportunity in the draft, it didn't yet appear as if all hope was lost, as the Blazers still had one of the most lethal weapons in the league, the young shooting guard Brandon Roy. At his peak, Kobe Bryant referred to Roy as the toughest player to guard in the entire Western Conference. But just like every other bright spot in Blazers history, this one didn't last very long either. After making 3 straight All-Star teams, Roy's knees had deteriorated to such an extreme extent that he no longer had any cartilage between the bones. By the time he was 26 years old, he had played his final game with the Portland Trail Blazers. A couple years later, Portland would select the superstar point guard Damian Lillard with the 6th pick of the 2012 draft. But since then, they haven't been able to surround him with the right supporting cast in order to be a championship contender. Basically, ever since they've acquired Lillard, they've been the standard of mediocrity, and that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. Here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier in this video, the Blazers are the most cursed franchise in the league, not necessarily because of how bad they are, but because of how promising they appear to be time and time again, just to end up leaving their fan base incredibly disappointed. And here's a stat that perfectly sums that up. From 1983 to 2003, the Blazers went to the playoffs for an impressive 21 consecutive seasons, and yet never won a single championship during that stretch. That's the longest streak of playoff berths without a championship in NBA history. To put that in perspective, the Spurs had a streak of 22 seasons where they made the playoffs and they won 5 championships in that stretch. The Celtics had a streak of 19 seasons and won 11 championships, and the Lakers had a streak of 17 seasons and won 5 championships. That pretty much sums up the Portland Trail Blazers as an organization. Typically, they're not good enough to win championships, but they're also consistently average, which means they're rarely in the draft lottery, which almost completely ruins their chances to acquire franchise players. And even then, when they are in the draft lottery, the universe still finds a way to screw it up for them, just like it did in these instances. All in all, the Blazers should have numerous championship banners in the rafters. They should have the jerseys hung of two of the greatest players of all time, and they should have several more Hall of Famers in their history. But unfortunately, injuries repeatedly destroyed those careers. So what do you guys think? Are the Blazers the most cursed franchise in NBA history? Or do you think there's another who's more deserving of that title? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks. When it comes to NBA analysts and former players with opinions, there's quite a few of them that I just can't stand. But I gotta be honest, none of them make me facepalm as often as the former Wizards All-Star Gilbert Arenas, as just recently, he had possibly the most awful take that I've ever heard, and I simply can't ignore it. The one thing I will give him credit for is that when it comes to unpopular basketball opinions, it takes some huge balls to speak your mind this boldly. Speaking of which, I suggest you take care of yours. Which is why today's video is brought to you by Manscaped, the brand trusted around the globe for men's grooming and hygiene products. Manscaped is a brand I've used and enjoyed for a while now. So today, I'm excited to introduce you to their latest product, the Handyman, a new compact face shaver. The Handyman delivers a quick, close shave with a unique dual blade system, capable of handling up to 3 days worth of growth. This new shaver is airplane friendly and holds a charge up to 60 minutes. This makes it ideal for those quick business trips and date night. No matter if you're constantly on the go or just need a quick refresh, Manscaped has got you covered. Use my code ARNETT at checkout and get 20% off your purchase of the Handyman from Manscaped. So for those of you who are not in the know, let me quickly provide you with some context. Hakeem Olajuwon is a former NBA legend, and he was a 7-foot superstar who played in the NBA from 1984 until 2002. Hakeem had a lot of skills on the basketball court, but possibly his greatest skill was his stellar footwork, as he utilized it to give him an offensive advantage in the past. To this day, many people believe Hakeem Olajuwon had the greatest footwork of any player who's ever played. Because of this, many active players have sought out Olajuwon long after his retirement, as they look to learn from his teaching and apply it to their game. Now after all this time, Hakeem Olajuwon decided to monetize these private workouts with NBA players, and is now charging $50,000 for a week of workouts. Now this is hardly a newsworthy story, that is, until Gilbert Arenas made it one. Take a listen for yourself on what Arenas had to say about Olajuwon's 50K training sessions.
I'm sorry, but nobody doing it. All you old son stand down. Nobody want the Hakeem Olajuwon sky hook. Nobody want none of that shit. All right, let it go. 50. You should be ashamed of yourself. Charging these young whippersnappers 50. When you came in the league in 1984, you wasn't getting 50,000 a game. You trying to make your money back through the youth. Giannis. No, I'm all for trainers getting their money. A week, you know how many big men we did? Hey, I'm blaming Hakeem Olajuwon for the reason we lost big men. The reason the 5 man is gone is because they go on the motherfuckers from the 90s and 80s learning they motherfucking moves. No, 50,000. Brook Lopez, you're good. Just go back to the basics, huh? You doing fine, Giannis. That. I'm sorry, Giannis, but I would not let you spend 50,000. 50,000? Come here. I teach you all that shit. Look. Look. I got moves. I'm still simple. I got moves on top of moves. I don't even know. I got books on top of books on moves. I keep notes. What? For 45 grand, I give you the upgraded version. He ain't been good since the 90s. That means all the moves in the 2000s, early 2000s, he don't know. 2010, he don't know. 2020, he don't know. He don't know. Who the f you gonna do the moves on?
Okay, wow. Where do I even start? First off, I see nothing wrong with Hakeem Olajuwon charging 50 G's for private workouts to learn his footwork. That's pocket change from modern NBA players. Many people, including yours truly, believe that Hakeem had the best basketball footwork of any person to ever live. And based on the fact that all-star level players keep going to Hakeem for his teaching, tells me that he's pretty good at coaching it. Imagine being so arrogant and so entitled that you think that you should be getting private lessons from someone who is the best in the world at what they're teaching, completely free of charge. Hakeem is simply living by the wise motto,
if you're good at something, never do it for free.
Sure, $50,000 might sound like a lot to you and me. But you have to remember, this is a multimillionaire teaching other multimillionaires how to be better at what makes their millions. That's called an investment, Gilbert. Based on these facts, it's completely reasonable for Hakeem to charge this amount for his private time and energy. Second, I always find it ridiculous how people act like the players from past generations are so far removed from the modern game. I also find it funny that Gilbert acts like Hakeem Olajuwon's skills and moves are so outdated. Yet by the end of his rant, he's pleading for players to give him money for his own personal workout sessions. Hakeem's final season in the NBA was the 2001 to 2002 season, which also happened to be the rookie season for Gilbert Arenas. So not only was Hakeem around not that long before Arenas, but some of their careers even slightly overlapped. Yet this clown has the audacity to act like Olajuwon is some sort of ancient dinosaur with nothing to offer. By the same logic that Hakeem Olajuwon is outdated and irrelevant, Gilbert Arenas is also outdated and irrelevant. But here's the thing that's crazy to me. Acting like Hakeem's skills are not valuable to the modern game is one of the dumbest takes I've ever heard. Have we seriously become so okay with legalizing traveling in the NBA that solid footwork is now being considered outdated? Even most young fans of modern basketball don't agree with Arenas on his assessment, because if anything, Hakeem is usually the center who is often referred to as ahead of his time. Sure, some modern fans act like Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain would struggle in the modern NBA, but who the hell says that about Hakeem? With his intelligence, his footwork, his mid-range shooting, his quickness, and with his remarkable athleticism, it's completely reasonable to assume that Olajuwon would have been one of the best players in the league even if he played in the modern game. Clearly his nickname Agent Zero was on point, as in zero brain cells. I honestly have to wonder, is he really so naive about NBA history that he's mixing up Hakeem Olajuwon with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? Because at one point, he's making fun of the idea of Hakeem dominating the game with his sky hook shot. And although Hakeem did have a hook shot in his arsenal, most of his baskets were variations of face-up mid-range jumpers that translate perfectly well to the modern game. Now, as always, I'm sure there might be some people viewing this video wondering why we should listen to the opinion of this basketball YouTuber versus the opinion of the former NBA superstar. Well, the thing is, that thinking is flawed, because it isn't just the opinion of Arenas versus mine, but it's the opinion of Arenas versus the opinions of NBA legends, like LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Dwight Howard, and Carmelo Anthony. All of those players who were better than Arenas thought it was worth their time to get private lessons from the Dream in order to improve their game. In the cases of Kobe and LeBron, they sought out those private lessons after they had established themselves as MVPs and as an NBA champion. But again, don't listen to me, Kobe, and LeBron. Listen to the former star shot chucker who shot below league average efficiency from the field and from three throughout his career and never got past the second round of the playoffs. He's clearly the wise voice of basketball expertise that you all should listen to. Now listen, normally I don't go at a player or analyst this harshly, but the thing is, Arenas is one of those guys who's extremely disrespectful to former NBA players, and part of me wonders if he even believes the things he's saying, or if he's saying it just to bring attention to himself. If that's the case, then he certainly succeeded on that front. But the reality is, if a former player is gonna be saying some dumb stuff because he's a clout-seeking clown, then you best believe that I'm gonna call him a clown when it's time for me to share my take.
I'm getting real tired of these disrespectful takes between older players and newer players in both directions. Without the older players, the game isn't as popular as it is today, affecting how well modern players are being paid. And without the newer players, all of the legends of the game just become forgotten has-beens from a league that's no longer popular or relevant. This negative energy towards each other is not something the game of basketball needs. But beyond the fact that he's being immensely disrespectful, he's also just flat out wrong on this take about Hakeem. And honestly, I think most of you guys in the comments will probably agree as well, whether you're young or old. So what do you guys think? What is the worst take you've ever heard from an NBA analyst or from an NBA player? I look forward to hearing your suggestions in the comment section below. Thanks. Basketball through time. That is the theme of my channel, as I often talk about the game's history and I even talk about the NBA's future. And we as the basketball community spend a lot of time making predictions and talking about where the game is headed. But every once in a while, you stumble upon something pretty cool from basketball's history that gives you a glimpse into what they thought about the NBA's future back then. That's what today's video is about. It was the 1987 to 1988 NBA season, and during 1988, the NBA was hosted by CBS. And during halftime of one of their broadcasts, they made a prediction about what the NBA would look like in 2020, which would be 32 years into the future. I could have sworn I saw this halftime report before on one of my dad's old VHS tapes. I did see a lot of the 1988 season, as I have the NBA All-Star Game and all of the NBA Finals on VHS. But I was recently reminded of this clip thanks to the YouTube channel Old School Basketball. That is a fantastic channel, and I'm telling you guys, if you love the history lessons you get on my channel, then I'm sure you'll love his as well. So go give him a sub and thank him for reminding us about this clip. So enough of my rambling, check out this lengthy clip so you can see what they predicted in 1988 that the NBA would look like in 2020.
Tonight, but let's project ahead towards still a different century, the year 2020. Pat O'Brien tells us what the NBA will be like.
And welcome to the CBS Sports Computer Center. You know, with all the talk lately about astrology and looking into the future, we kind of wondered what the future holds for the game of basketball. And so through modern technology, we programmed data first from the year 1956, the year many people believe was the birth of modern-day basketball. Then in went 1988. And then we asked the computer to project what the game of basketball will look like in the year 2020.
Welcome to the NBA 2020.
32 years down the road, and not surprisingly, the players will be bigger and stronger. The average height, 6'10". Guards will come in at 6'6". Forwards, just under 7 feet. And the men in the middle will all look like Mark Eaton at 7'3". Bigger, yes, but better?
It is projected that the scoring average will rise to 234 points per game. The field goal percentage will rise to 57%, but at the line it will still be under 80%.
Presumably there will be limits, and if human beings still have the limitations of trying to plop the ball in the basket from a distance, there's going to be a limit well before 100% in how far things can keep improving.
The new modern city game will definitely have a new look in the year 2020. For one, the court will change, the lanes will get wider, after all the players are, and to add some additional excitement, the three-point line now becomes a four-point line.
2, 1, aim for 4, it's good!
And oh yes, as you guessed, the hoop will go from 10 to 11 feet, and there will be a new stat, frequent flyer miles.
People are going to just be able to fly. Everybody would play above the rim. That's what I envision.
And what will get them off the ground? Fuel-injected sneakers of molded thermoplastic, and the uniform, temperature regulators, hang time extender bellows, and fatigue warning devices.
It's going to be real space technology stuff. The wide base, the stabilizer jets, shock absorption, foam flow. There'll be a new definition for hang time.
And a new definition for spending money. For openers, your program will cost $30. It'll feature audio and video. The average ticket price, $90, except in LA, where the floor seats will be over $1,000. And you one-year-olds, listen up. You can make some big bucks playing basketball. Big bucks.
I guess it could be $25 million for a marginal player, and I can see a $100 million player. I don't know if the year 2020 is the year or the year 2030, but I don't think at that rate, no matter what the situation is, that you'll see very many long-term contracts at that price.
The National Basketball Association, NBA, will change to the International Basketball Association. And about this time of year in 2020, you'll see a very physical Eastern Conference.
Right now, the NBA champion is the world champion. Perhaps they'll lay claim to that title in the year 2020. The NBA champion will have to play the other best teams in the world.
And where will we be in the year 2020? Right where we always are.
And welcome back to At the Half, recapping our top stories. Larry Brown says there's no truth to the rumors that he is leaving Madrid to be the coach of the New York Knickerbockers. And all eyes on Tel Aviv tonight as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is set to score his 100,000th point. The 73-year-old center told me that this season will definitely be his last. That's it for us from the new Starship Enterprise. I'm Pat O'Brien. Thanks for joining us on the Prudential At the Half. Enjoy the second half here on CBS.
So there's a lot to tackle here, and it was really fun just to see what their idea of the future looked like back in the 1980s. They were incredibly off about the height of the players. In the 2019 to 2020 regular season, the average height of the general NBA player was 6 foot 6 inches tall. And in 1988, it was actually 6 foot 7 inches tall. So not only did players not get bigger, they actually got smaller, and a lot of that was probably due to a greater emphasis on spacing and perimeter shooting, which definitely favors the guards. To me, this is yet another classic example of how the bigger and stronger modern athlete's narrative is always greatly exaggerated. They exaggerate it now when talking about the current athletes, and they were even exaggerating it in 1988 when talking about future athletes. Ultimately, we haven't advanced in the last 30 to 40 years as much as some people would like you to think. As far as their scoring averages and efficiency predictions, well, those were also greatly exaggerated. In 2020, games were averaging 221.2 points per game. Field goal percentage was also wildly off, as they predicted it to climb to 57%, but it actually declined to 46%. This isn't all that surprising, since they probably didn't foresee the inflation of three-point shots, which naturally dropped field goal percentages across the board. But I will give them the fact that their predictions about free throw percentages was pretty close. They were incorrect about the foul lanes becoming wider, and although there is not a 4-point line just yet, the idea has been flirted with on multiple occasions. And for a while, some NBA team practice facilities actually had a 4-point line in preparation for its future installation. And then there's modern players like Steph Curry and Damian Lillard who are regularly burying shots from what could be a 4-point line distance. So although they were off about the prediction in 2020, it still could end up materializing down the road. Now the basketball rim hasn't been elevated to 11 feet, and I don't see that happening at any point in the future. Closest thing we had to that was Dwight Howard raising the rim during an NBA dunk contest. The predictions about the shoes and the uniforms were straight up goofy, and as of now, they're still just basic clothing even in the 2020s. Now the one area where they hilariously underestimated was in terms of the cash involved. They predicted NBA game tickets to be around $90, and as high as $1,000 for courtside seats, which honestly sounds like a steal in this current day. Player contracts were also comically off base, as they predicted a $100 million player as if it was this otherworldly number. But just several months ago, Jason Tatum signed a 5-year, $314 million contract. Also consider how they were making that $100 million prediction based on the prediction of longer contracts in their era, some contracts being as long as 10 seasons. So $314 million in 5 years is more like a $600 million prediction in 1988. The International Basketball Association prediction wasn't totally accurate, but there have been teams in Canada like the Toronto Raptors and once upon a time, the Vancouver Grizzlies. And the NBA has been regularly hosting games overseas to advertise their product. Still, that's not quite the same as battling teams in Russia in the regular season, which is what they predicted. By far, my favorite part of the video though was seeing them predict Kareem to score his 100,000th point at the age of 73. It's cool to see how they made longevity jokes about Kareem just like they do today about LeBron James. History really does repeat itself after all. So now you guys have seen CBS's prediction about what the NBA would look like in 2020, and although they were accurate about a few things, for the most part they were wildly off base, and made far too many assumptions about the advancement of the players. With that being said, the NBA has changed a lot in the last few decades, so that got me wondering, if we made NBA predictions about what the league would look like another 32 years into the future, what would they be? What do you think the NBA will look like in the 2055 to 2056 season? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. On my channel, I've talked a lot about the various MVP winners throughout NBA history, but what I haven't done is express my genuine opinion on who the most undeserving MVP winners were. Today, I'm giving you my list, starting with the least egregious to the most egregious. So starting off the list, the 5th most undeserving MVP in NBA history was Joel Embiid in 2023. I gotta admit, sometimes it's very hard to put very recent events on lists like this, because it often feels like we haven't had enough time to process everything and objectively rank it within the grand scheme of history. With that being said, I felt like I just gotta have this recent MVP race on the list. From an individual standpoint, Joel Embiid certainly had a fantastic regular season, as he averaged 33 points and 10 rebounds on 65.5 true shooting percentage. The thing is, there seemed to be a manufactured push to get Embiid the MVP award. The media was pushing it, Embiid was basically begging for it, and voter fatigue was beginning to set in for Jokic, seeing that he had won the MVP award in the previous 2 seasons. Having Embiid on the list is not an indication that I wasn't impressed by his season. It's just an indication that Jokic's season was significantly more impressive. He played more regular season games than Embiid, he had a better player efficiency rating, a better win share total, and a much higher true shooting percentage. Jokic nearly averaged a triple-double with the highest assists per game average ever for a player at the center position. You really can't say enough positive things about what the Joker accomplished. From an offensive standpoint, you could argue that Jokic had the most efficient season in NBA history. For example, of all players who averaged at least 20 points per game, he had easily the greatest true shooting percentage of all time at 70.1%. At the end of the day, there was no legitimate reason to give the award to Embiid over the Joker. Number 4. Bill Walton in 1978. At first glance, Walton may seem like a very deserving MVP this season. For one, his Portland Trailblazers were the defending NBA champions, and he did put up solid numbers of 19 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2.5 blocks on 52% shooting from the field, while finishing the regular season with a 58-24 record. But here's the part you might not be aware of. Walton was dealing with injuries as he always was, and because of this, he only participated in 58 of the Blazers' 82 regular season games that season. That 58 game total is the fewest ever by a player who won the MVP award. The player who he narrowly won the race over was the 25-year-old star George Gervin, who led his Spurs to 52 wins and put up averages of 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals on 53.6% shooting. And unlike Walton, Gervin played all 82 games. Honestly, you could argue that George Gervin, David Thompson, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar were all more deserving than Walton was that year, based on the fact that he missed nearly 1/3 of that season. In fact, of the top 5 MVP vote-getters that season, Walton easily had the fewest win shares. Based on the new modern rule that a player needs to play at least 65 games to win an award, Gervin would have been the league MVP instead, and probably rightfully so. Number 3. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1976. From an individual standpoint, no single player was a more dominant and productive presence in the 1970s than the 7'2" Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. From a statistical perspective, there's basically no reason why Kareem was undeserving, as he put up monstrous averages of 28 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 blocks on 53% shooting. The thing is, as much as he was tearing up other centers within the league, it wasn't translating to much winning, as his Lakers finished that regular season with a losing record of 40-42 while missing the playoffs. Even with that disaster of a season, they still gave him the MVP award. I would argue that the only thing that's actually valuable at that point for the team was their draft pick for their losing record. On the other hand, the 1975 MVP, Bob McAdoo, just narrowly missed on winning the award for the second straight season, as Kareem finished with 409 voting points, and McAdoo finished with 393. McAdoo led his Buffalo Braves to a solid 46-36 record, while putting up 31 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks on 48.7% shooting. McAdoo's Braves obviously made it to the playoffs that year, alongside of their winning record, which is a testament to his important value. Giving the award to a player who missed the playoffs is a highly questionable decision in general, but especially after the 1960s decade, where they gave the award to Bill Russell instead of Wilt Chamberlain over and over again. It seemed like a grossly inconsistent decision by the voters, making this specific award in 1976 even less legitimate in my eyes. Number 2. Dave Cowens in 1973. As I was starting to write this script, I was wondering what the heck was wrong with the voters in the 1970s, but I realized it actually makes sense, seeing how the players did the voting prior to 1979, and they were literally on drugs. Cowens was a fantastic superstar player who is an underrated big man of Celtics history, and he did have a solid season as he put up averages of 20 points, 16 rebounds, and 4 assists on 45% shooting. His Celtics did have an incredible 68-14 record, which helped him secure the award. But here's the thing, he was barely the MVP of his own team, as John Havlicek and JoJo White had comparable monstrous seasons of their own. Then you look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was barely the runner-up for the MVP award. Not only did Kareem destroy Cowens from a production standpoint, but he was also the clear leader of his Milwaukee Bucks that ended up winning 60 games. Kareem averaged 30 points, 16 rebounds, and 5 assists on 55% shooting, while nearly doubling the win share total of Cowens. Simply put, this should have been in favor of Kareem, and it shouldn't have been even close. Number 1. Bill Russell in 1962. To me, this is the most undeserving MVP award in NBA history, and it's not because Russell didn't have a solid season, but it's because of who he was up against. Russell led his Celtics to a 60-20 record while putting up 19 points, 23 rebounds, and 4 assists on 45.7% shooting. I understand that Russell was the leader of the team with the best record in the NBA, and technically he gets an edge for being on the winning team. But it's not like Wilt Chamberlain's team wasn't winning as well. Wilt led his Warriors to a 49-31 record, which was the second best record in the East. And he did that while averaging a goofy 50.4 points, 25.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists on 50.6% shooting. He had a 32-point edge over Russell in points per game while being more efficient from the field and from the free throw line. He had the edge in rebounds, and he outperformed Russell in basically every advanced stat. The only things you could objectively point to as an advantage for Russell was slightly higher assists and a better team record, but that's not necessarily a reflection of their individual talent that season. but more about their supporting casts, as the Celtics had twice as many All-Stars on their roster. In his career, Russell deserved several Finals MVPs, many DPOYs, and several League MVP awards. But in this case specifically, this one should have gone to Wilt. And as far as I'm concerned, anyone who argues otherwise just wants to be different. So what do you guys think? There are many different controversial MVP awards that could have made my list, but didn't. Which one do you think should have been on here? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.